Thanks, buddy. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so very much for attending our very first Trello Day. It's really been a blast being here in Barcelona and getting to know some of you. I'm here to talk about a self-destructive force that prevents people from doing their most important work, how to recognize this force within you, and how Trello can help you manage it. During my Trello career, I've had a unique opportunity to speak with hundreds of customers and learn about dozens of use cases. I'm also someone who's personally encountered this force and can speak from experience. 2.5 years ago, this force hit me like a prize fighter. It tried to demoralize me. It tried to stunt my growth. If it had succeeded, it would have completely changed the trajectory of my personal growth and a sport that's become an exciting new part of my life. I've been an outdoorsman all my life, but as I've grown older, I've spent less and less time in nature. In April of 2016, a friend invited me to climb the Grand Teton, a classic alpine peak located in Wyoming, with an elevation of nearly 4,200 meters, or 13,775 feet. Now, I enjoy hiking, but at that time, I had barely climbed to 2,900 meters, or 9,500 feet. This was going to be a big step outside of my comfort zone. However, I felt a life inside me that wanted to come out, a life that had been suppressed. I accepted the invitation, created a Trello board, and started preparing for the August climb. I made a reservation with the guide service and paid a deposit. I started shopping for equipment and started training. All was going well until the initial excitement wore off and pessimistic voices started stirring in my head. They sounded like this. Hey, Mike, you're not a mountaineer. This trip, it's too expensive. You're going to be a new dad soon. It's way too risky. At first, I ignored the voices, but they got stronger and stronger until one morning I acted on them. I picked up the phone and I called the guide service, intent on canceling my reservation and refunding my deposit. As the phone rang, a part of me felt crushed. As it continued ringing, a part of me hoped no one would answer. No one did, so I hung up. The next morning, I dialed the phone again, and again, a part of me felt crushed. And again, no one answered. Why did I do this? I was over the moon to accept my friend's invitation. But then I fell back down to earth, where I preferred the known over the unknown, the comfortable over the uncomfortable, the couch over the trail. I didn't know it then, but looking back on it, I was being attacked by resistance with a capital R. Resistance is the term used by Steven Pressfield in his book, The War of Art, to describe the self-destructive force that prevents people from doing their most important work. Pressfield is the author of several screenplays and more than a dozen books, including The Legend of Bagger Vance, which was made into a film of the same name, directed by Robert Redford. At first, Pressfield thought this force only applied to him. Then he thought it only applied to writers. Finally, and with the input of others, he learned it applies to everyone. Maybe you're an artist who doesn't create art, like a writer who doesn't write, or a painter who doesn't paint, or an actor who doesn't act. Or maybe you're an entrepreneur who wants to start a venture, but never gets around to it. Or maybe you're a concerned citizen who wants to run for public office, but never sees your name on the ballot. We all have our calling, meaning our work, our destiny, our obligation to become a higher version of ourselves. And unless I'm crazy, there's a small voice inside your head popping up and reminding you of your calling, the way it has 1,000 times before. Chances are, you're no closer to taking action on it than you were yesterday or will be tomorrow. I'm here to talk about how you can change that today. The first step is to recognize how resistance reveals itself in you. Resistance is internal. So although it may seem to come from external sources like bosses, spouses, or children, it doesn't. It comes from within you. Symptoms include unhappiness. We're bored, we're restless, we feel guilty, but we don't know why. Self-doubt. We question our desires, our abilities. Are we being authentic if we pursue them? Criticism. We're critical of ourselves. We may even be critical of others. Distraction. We're consumed by meaningless content, clickable headlines, binge-worthy television. Shallowness. Our actions are empty or trivial. Perfectionism. We don't act until everything is just right. Now, all these symptoms are rooted in fear. However, the granddaddy of them all is procrastination. And procrastination has a voice. It'll tell you anything to prevent you from doing your work. And it's really, really good at rationalizing. Procrastination sounds like this. I'll do my work, but first I have to check email or Facebook, or I have to clean my desk. But it also sounds like this. I really shouldn't work now because I have to go to my kid's football game. What kind of parent am I if I miss it? After all, we don't tell ourselves, I'm never going to write my book. We say, I'm going to write my book. I'm just going to start tomorrow. Now that we know a little bit about resistance, how can we manage it? There are 4 things that we can do. 1, be conscious of it. Know that it exists. If it helps, you can think of it as an adversary or as an enemy or as a dragon that needs to be slayed. 2, learn to recognize the voice of resistance inside you so that you can dismiss that voice. 3, you can navigate by resistance. The more symptoms you feel about doing something, the more important the work. The 4th thing we can do is make a start. Now, this is the hardest thing to do because remember, we don't tell ourselves that I'm never going to run a marathon. We say, I'm going to start training tomorrow. Best-selling author Og Mandino encourages us to consider the lesson of the firefly, who gives off its light only when in action. We can make a start. This is where Trello can help. Okay, so how can Trello help? As mentioned, during my Trello career, I've had the privilege of speaking with hundreds of customers, many of whom use Trello with the Getting Things Done method. The GDT method emphasizes moving projects out of the mind, recording them somewhere externally, and then breaking them into actionable tasks. There are 4 steps to this. Number 1, find a collection tool or a device that helps you capture ideas. Collection tools can be analog, like journals, or they can be digital, like Trello. Step number 2, clarify what you want. Now the key here is to do this in 1 sentence. Albert Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Step number 3, decide the next steps that you need to take. And step number 4, set reminders that you can regularly review. Now let's walk through an example. I climbed the Grand Teton, which led to a second invitation from my friend, this time to climb Denali, the highest peak in North America, with an elevation of 6,190 meters, or 20,310 feet. I accepted the invitation, but soon thereafter, the familiar voices started. Mike, you're not a mountaineer. This trip is far more expensive than the last trip. You should save instead of spend money. You should spend time with your wife and your newborn daughter instead of pursuing your own selfish interests. Step number 1, find a collection tool. Trello is my collection tool, so I create a Trello board. Now here's a tip on board backgrounds. There's power in visualization. A 2004 Cleveland Clinic study compared people who went to the gym to people who had visual workouts in their heads. After a 3-month period, the people who went to the gym saw a 30% muscle increase. However, the people who just did mental exercises saw a 13.5% muscle increase. That's nearly half the increase of the gym group. If Trello was around in the 1980s, actor Jim Carrey might have used an image like this for his Trello board background. Before Carrey was famous, he was an aspiring entertainer who visualized the things he wanted to manifest in his life. He believed these things already existed, and all he had to do was attain them. Carrey wrote himself a check for $10 million, and he carried it in his pocket, where it deteriorated over the years. His visualization was realized when he was cast in the film Dumb and Dumber and paid $10 million. So pick a board background that helps you visualize your calling. Step number 2, clarify what you want in one sentence. I create a list. I call it motivation and resources. In that list, I create a card. I call this my why card. And here I write my sentence. Now, this sentence changed several times during the course of my Denali preparation as I thought more and more about why I wanted to climb the mountain. This is the most important card on the board, so I want to park on this for just a moment. Just like there is power in visualization, there also is power in contemplating why you want to do something. Simon Sinek wrote about this in his book, Start With Why. Most of us start with what? In my example, I want to climb a mountain. But what really drives success, however, is the why. Because the why elicits emotion. And emotion is more powerful than reason. When you make a decision based off of a strong why, you own it. You're sold. Not on the idea, but on the cause of the idea. And you'll go above and beyond to support that idea with your time and your resources. This is why the why card is so important. Now here's a tip. The Reedy Powerup is a pop-up that appears when you open a Trello board. Here you can write a welcome message or instructions on how to use a board. You can adjust the pop-up so that it loads every time you open a board, or only when opening a board for the first time. This is a great place to post your why sentence. Step number 3, decide next steps. I create 2 more lists, a to-do list and a done list. And the idea here is to move completed cards from one list to the other. Here's a tip. One thing that makes Trello such a fantastic collection tool is its mobile and offline capability. You can create to-do cards whenever you're inspired and wherever you roam. Here's another tip. When you're creating these to-do cards, don't make them too general. For example, if you're writing a screenplay, don't create a to-do card that simply says, finish screenplay. Instead, break down the tasks necessary in order to complete the project. Create to-do cards for the inciting incident, the ending, the theme, the subplot, etc. Now, if you feel overwhelmed when deciding next steps, remember this story. Once upon a time, there was a 10-year-old boy who had to write a school report on birds. He was given 3 months to complete the assignment. But when did he start it? The day before, while at his family cabin. The boy was sitting at his kitchen table in tears, immobilized by the huge task ahead of him. The boy's father sat down beside the boy, put his arm around him, and said, "Bird by bird, buddy. Just take it, bird by bird." So don't look too far ahead. Concentrate solely on the first step, and then the next step, and then the next. So why is it so important to determine your next steps? Is it to get organized or to feel on top of things? No. Actually, and if you'll permit me to geek out here for a moment, it's because of a phenomenon known as the Zeigarnik Effect. In 1927, Russian psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik and a class of university students visited a restaurant in Berlin, Germany. The waiter took their orders, but never wrote anything down. All dinners were received exactly as ordered, and Bluma was impressed by the waiter's photographic memory. Outside after dinner, Bluma realized that she had forgotten her scarf. So she returned to the restaurant and asked the waiter if he had seen it. He had no idea who she was or where she sat. Bluma asked, "How could you have forgotten, especially with your photographic memory?" The waiter replied, "I keep every order in my head until it's served." In the 1980s, almost 60 years after Bluma's observation, an experiment was carried out to test the Zeigarnik Effect. Participants were asked to complete a puzzle. However, they were interrupted and told that the study was over before they could solve it. Despite this, nearly 90% carried out the work and completed the puzzle anyway. The Zeigarnik Effect teaches us a couple of things. One, we have a tendency to remember incomplete tasks more than completed ones. And two, the things that we have left undone will tend to plague us until we complete them. In other words, it's in our nature to finish what we start. The secret, therefore, to overcoming resistance is to make a start and to make it really, really easy. The trick is to not overwhelm yourself thinking about all the tasks in their entirety, but rather to commit to the first task in the sequence. If you can get the first task underway, the rest will tend to follow. This is why it's so important to determine your next steps. Not because it makes you feel organized or on top of things. Instead, when you create a to-do list, you elicit the Zeigarnik Effect. Psychologically, you'll want to complete your tasks. You'll want to move them to the done list. Now, there's a possible side effect when moving cards to the done list. As cards pile up, you can leave them there, or you can archive them. A couple years ago, I gave a demo to a Trello customer, and he shared his Trello board with me and dozens of cards in his done list. We talked about archiving the cards, but he opposed the idea. Not because it was a bad idea, but because he felt a strong sense of accomplishment from seeing all the work that had been completed. Step number 4, set reminders. Have you ever seen a flashlight with dead batteries? When does your brain remind you that you need new ones? When you go to use the flashlight and you notice the dead ones. This is why we set reminders. When you create a to-do card, ask yourself, when do I need to see this card again? And add a due date to it. If you don't put a reminder in place, your mind will keep pressuring you about the open task, which will add to your stress. Okay, so let's recap the 4 steps to manage resistance. Number 1, be conscious of it. Know that it exists. Again, you can think of it as an adversary or as an enemy or as a dragon that needs to be slayed. Number 2, learn to recognize the voice of resistance inside you so that you can dismiss that voice. Number 3, remember that you can navigate by resistance. The more symptoms you feel about doing something, the more important the work. And number 4, make a start. This, of course, is where Trello can help. So let's recap the 4 steps to making a start. Number 1, find a collection tool that works for you. Number 2, clarify what you want. Again, the key here is to do this in 1 sentence. Number 3, decide the next steps that you need to take in order to get the ball rolling. And number 4, set reminders that you can regularly review. So, what can you expect when you do all of this? Frankly, you're not much closer to your desired outcome, whether it's writing a book, or starting a business, or climbing a mountain. However, you switch from a consumption mindset to a creative mindset. You switch from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. You gain clarity on what the project really is about and the associated next steps. You build trust in a system for collecting ideas, projects, and tasks. And you free your mind from to-dos, which reduces stress and helps you think more productively and creatively. There's something else you can expect. Something that Scottish mountaineer W.H. Murray describes as follows, and I'll quote, "Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits myself, then Providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred." Providence moved me in the spring of 2016 when I placed 2 phone calls that thankfully went unanswered, and as a result, set me on a new and exciting path. So where will Providence move you? At this very moment, there are countless artists who are busy updating Facebook instead of writing prose or stirring paint or memorizing lines. There are countless entrepreneurs who are preoccupied posting business articles on LinkedIn rather than getting to work. There are countless citizens who are arguing about politics rather than getting involved. So what about you? When you reflect on this talk, will it have been a waste of 20 minutes or a catalyst to move towards your most important work? I want to thank the Atlassian marketing team and the events team for inviting me to speak today. And I want to thank all of you for your interest in this topic. You're on the precipice of an amazing opportunity right now. So congratulations. I wish you nothing but success. I hope you crush it. I hope you slay the dragon and unleash your unlived life.